Hello, everybody. Hope you got your coffee. This is John Barnwell here, and I'm pleased to share the platform here with my good friend, Reverend David William Parry, or should I say Right Reverend.
Oh.
Your proper honorific. But I thought it'd be good to continue our conversation, what is truth, because that's a pretty broad subject. And it seems to be one of my pet projects is to try and ferret out exactly what's going on in the world, in the real world, not in the propaganda world. But with our conversations, I try not to get too embroiled in straight up contemporary politics, because there's really a lot of that going on, and I do that in other conversations. But hey, if we slip into that, all my apologies are freely given. David, how are you doing today?
My friend, it's always a supreme pleasure to be on this show and to be talking to you. And you know, I genuinely mean that. It's a real joy for me. Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't have my customary British cup of tea with me to compliment your American coffee today, but I'll be more prepared next week. As for honorifics, I mean, it depends what church group I'm actually working with at a particular time. I'm happy with just the word pastor, to be honest, or reverend, and particularly because I'm in the process of transferring all of my credentials over to Metropolitan Community Church, and there are loads of reasons why, not just the LGBTQ. Oh, what is it nowadays? LGBTQ plus something. I'm not even sure I know what all the letters are now. But you know, because they're also very modern and they're very engaged, and they still believe in things like the social gospel. I remember years back when I was with them, moaning all the time. Why do we always talk about the social gospel? Why do we always talk about the social gospel? Why don't we ever talk about mysticism? And now it's me that's moaning that none of us are talking about the social gospel. So yeah, there are loads of reasons that's happening, and with them, I simply aspire to being reverend as opposed to anything else. As for truth, curiously, I was having a conversation less than 20 minutes ago with my young companion about Edmund Husserl and phenomenology, who, of course, wouldn't have denied. That's where the postmodernists, I think, get him wrong. He wouldn't have denied that there was truth with a capital T. He would have denied we have access to it. I mean, I mean, I think phenomenology is the actual time bomb. If we all survive as a civilization, which I'm not sure we will at the moment, if the Western mind manages to survive the next 20 years, which doesn't look promising at the moment, maybe we'll have an answer for Descartes finally, and you know, be talking about wonderful things like what's the phenomena saying to us. You know, what was his great thing? He had an image of a monkey having a galaxy in its brain. In other words, an astronomer.
Yeah,
you know, how can that happen? You know, how can you know? But it's a beautiful image. It's a wonderful image. It's a profound image. And yeah, point taken. So you know, how can these amazing things happen? And of course, it led him to other things like, you know, we've got to stop telling the world what it's like and start listening to it. That's when we'll get to the truth. So I think he's the real time bomb in academia, which is why everybody's ignoring him, of course. He's the real time bomb waiting to go off. If we get that far, John, you know, as I was saying, I'm strengthened, spiritually strengthened by the fact most of the Americans I know hail from Michigan, which is beginning to dawn on me. As I was saying to you off air, that's beginning to dawn on me now. I know one or two mavericks who are not. One from Newark, New Jersey. My God, that sounds like a tough gig if you're growing up in Newark, New Jersey. But no, I mean, you know, people keep telling me, all of my American friends keep telling me we're actually on the verge of civil war. I do hope that's not the truth with either a capital or a lowercase t. I can't see who benefits from that. And I can't really see how that not only would resolve anything, but the little I know about American politics, culture, yes, politics, no. The little I know, I can't see where that would be going, and I can't see what it would resolve. I don't know what you think about that, John.
Well, it doesn't resolve anything, and it wasn't really meant to resolve anything. It's merely a tool in the hands of the multinational globalists to try and wedge the American people out from beneath the protections, the limited, as of late, protections that they still maintain, living under the Constitution. And the big thorn in the side of the globalists and Agenda 21, Agenda, all these different agendas that they have is the UN and that whole nefarious network of authoritarianism is what it amounts to, and which is really a springboard for ideas that came out of the City of London, I'm sorry to say. Not that it's your fault. But after all, you do have ancestors that were from the East India Company, so I guess you might owe me reparations of some sort. But in any event, no, it's they're trying to destroy the American idea, and that's the real crux of the matter. Yeah, and somebody's saying if the Democrats remove the Electoral College, there won't be a civil war, but a right-wing armed insurrection. Well, let's not go there. We don't want to go into an armed anything if we can. But part of the problem for the left is that there's great many people. There's more guns in America than there are people. And what's interesting, though, is that 30% of the membership of NRA are registered Democrats. So there's Democrats that don't believe in giving up their guns either. Just so these coasters, as we call them, coasters, something you put underneath your drink. People on the left coast. They're on the right coast too. I mean, New York has just become a weird counter image of itself. I don't know. It's like it just shows you the extent to which election fraud can turn the dial of politics. But I was hoping we wouldn't get off into too much political talk here, but I have to share something with you that I think is critically important. Here is de Tocqueville, his Democracy in America. He was a very interesting character. And by the way, that's to me the most desirable edition because it has the introduction to each volume of de Tocqueville's own work, the analysis by John Stuart Mill, who we've talked about on numerous occasions, who's actually considered to be one of the fathers of liberalism. Okay, so if these people think they're liberal, no, they're just using the word. They're not liberal at all. And they're actually more Trotskyites, and they're in there with Herbert Marcuse, as expressed in his A Critique of Pure Tolerance, in which he makes the point of that it becomes necessary to be intolerant to put into effect his ideas, basically. So these people, they just want to control the narrative. They want to own the narrative. They want to arrest you if you don't go along with the program. All we need to do is look what happened in Ohio to America's friend, Millennial Millie Weaver, who got arrested for the Shadowgate documentary that she made, which I recommend everybody seek out and find. If you have trouble finding it, you can always find it on Band.video. And then there's that whole event in Melbourne of the officer choking the woman because she didn't have a mask. I guess a mask wouldn't prevent her from breathing good enough, so he decided to choke her. It's like, no, the world is gone off the rails in certain areas, and so I'd like to think that we would promote finding a rudder or a keel even to keep the ship running on the straight and narrow, because we've entered into turbulent waters.
Gosh, I don't think I can even comment on Australian news. I've got friends in Melbourne as well, so I better keep quiet. Yeah, I don't know what's going on at the minute, John. It feels like there's a great change happening on all sorts of levels, but perhaps we're just in too many of the early stages to see its benefits. I don't know. As for the East India Company, I may indeed have had some relatives involved, but I can assure you none of their money and power came in my direction. So if you're seeking reparation, you might need someone further up the chain than me.
Well, actually, were you to throw your glove into the ring, they would accept you with open arms, because you're of the blood, as they say. So you could probably make a lot of money being a globalist. You might hate yourself, but hey, that's the price of being rich. Sometimes you have to hate yourself.
I'm relatively happy being a poor pastor, I think.
Actually, some of the happiest times of my life, I was as poor as a church mouse, as they say.
No, I mean, oh gosh, where do I go with that one? I'm not sure I'm happy living in the UK forever, but that's a work in progress. We're talking about that at some other point. Oh gosh, I assume that the power elites of Britain, I mean, as things might be on the verge of kicking off in America, and in Britain, they're getting ever more under control, which is just what happens here, with a police force becoming transmuting into something reminiscent of the Stasi. Walking along the street showing their authority. I'm sorry, I thought you were meant to be community police officers. We pay your wages. In Britain, there isn't that sort of political element because they all take oaths to the Queen. I mean, the Queen, the libertarian in me doesn't want a monarchy. So you can all throw, present company accepted, you can all throw brickbats at me as we go along. My point of view is, right, okay, the present Queen she's really, she's a pro. She knows what to do. She always turns up to an event on time. She always leaves on time. She shakes all the right hands and then she's gone again. What a pro. But she must be the last one. She must be the last one. What are the rest doing? Hangers on that haven't got the same savoir faire as the Queen, so they can all sod off as far as I'm concerned. No, Britain's too. It's too authoritarian in its roots. That's my trouble with Britain. What was it though? I can't remember. Raymond Massey. I can't remember the film offhand. It's David Niven is a young British Air Force pilot who's shot down over the Channel. And there's a mistake in the other world. I can never remember the name of the movie, even though most of it happens in the other world. And he's accidentally given extra years of life. And it becomes a court case in the other world where the first man who was shot in the American War of Independence actually becomes the prosecutor. And you get some. So I thought that was a brilliant move. And you get the. Oh God! His name's gone. It was there, and his name's gone. There we are. You get the local doctor, David Niven's doctor, to defend him. Raymond Massey. There was an immortal line about freedom. Raymond Massey says, "Well, sir, you can strike a flint over a wet blanket," by which he meant Britain, of course. And I was sat there thinking, my God, he's right. He's absolutely right, and it won't burn. So No, we've got to recover the best parts of us, not the most servile parts of us. We've got to recover the spirit of the levelers and the spirit of the diggers and people that believed there was more to civil life than police authority. And of course, as I said a minute ago, they're meant to be servants of the community because they took an oath to the Queen. That's the full circle there. They're not political in Britain, and if they start playing politics, then technically they can be removed from office. They're servants of the community because they've taken an oath to the Queen, and that's how it should remain here until we can find a greater form of liberty amongst ourselves. So for me, is the world falling apart at the minute? I suppose the answer is yes and no. Obviously, there are seismic psychological changes across the planet, and all at once. I don't find that coincidental. I mean, I don't know what the Steinerian view of that would be. I mean, I'm quite looking forward to giving that feedback in a minute. But because it feels to me like the spirit stretching, like Gaia wanting a greater form of manifestation. The Earth Goddess, the Earth Mother herself, saying, it's time to move on, lads. It's time to move up the scale a bit. And I'm sure the great mystics, and Steiner in particular, would have had a lot to say about that. But, in terms of Britain, okay, what we've got to do is remember, the better part of us went to America in those days. And yet, what are we left with? People that need to recover the ancient spirit of liberty, which was in this land very, very strongly until recent times. So, over to you, Dr. Steiner.
By the way, Neil, over on the sideboard there, he said the movie's Stairway to Heaven with Raymond Massey. Yes. Thank you, Neil. And that was a good movie. I always liked David Niven. I don't hold it against him that he worked for MI6. I mean, basically, if you've taken an oath to the Queen, you work for MI6 anyways. I mean, that's the way people understand, and that's part and parcel of what is the analysis, shall we say, the refiguring of Emanuel Swedenborg's biography, because it was my friend Marcia Keith Schuchard who was the one who, through her digging into primary documentation, was able to establish that basically Emanuel Swedenborg was acting on behalf of the Swedish government and as a spy. I mean, if you go to other countries and you meet important people, then you get back home and they say, okay, what did they say? You can say, oh, I'm not going to tell you to the king. So consequently, it goes without saying that it's just like when people say they're former intelligence. There's no such thing as former intelligence. There's no, not really. At least as far as the intelligence community is concerned, once they got you by the short hairs, they have you for life. Female, oh yeah. Yeah, well, Elizabeth, she's problematic because she's got a great poker face. So we really don't know what's going on, between her ears. I mean, but if you look at what her kids are doing, it doesn't look good. I mean, geez, yeah, Andrew fondling underage girls with a Prince Andrew puppet. I mean, you can't make that up. Oh, by the way, I didn't make it up. It actually happened, allegedly. I have to remember he's not a political figure, so I have to put in the allegedly, because here you can say most anything about a politician, but not anybody else. In any event, and then Prince Charles' friendship with our friend from Tops of the Pops. What's his name?
Jimmy Savile. Jimmy Savile.
Jimmy Savile, yes. We paid for a wing on a children's hospital so he'd have access to children and children's corpses. I mean, there's something very, very wrong in the House of Windsor, in my mind. And so consequently, I I love the British people. I mean, geez, I've spent most of my life, a central focus has been uh, British destiny, which is why I know a lot about it, and about the Privy Council and the City of London and the machinations that surrounded the court of James I and the Jacobites and the flight of the wild geese to France and the various problems between all the various factions of the Christian church and so it's exceedingly complicated, and there's a depth of history there, and I sincerely hope that you folks can find some kind of parody that doesn't succumb to this weird specter of materialistic thinking. And you brought up Steiner, by the way. The simplest answer I can give, coming out of the work of Rudolf Steiner, is that you could say that materialism is a mindset that ends in entropy, right? It just like collapses in on itself because it's insufficient to encompass the reality of the world in which we live. It has no concept of supersensible beings, let alone supersensible, period, even though our sense perceptions are so limited in their capacity to perceive the world around us. I mean, almost everything is filtered out. I mean, if you look at a spectrum analysis of our senses, you see that it's like we're just on one radio station out of literally who knows how many. So consequently, but it does function in a particular way, and consequently, he does make the point in the lecture cycle that he did. It's in his collected works, volume 167. I can't think of the title. It's funny, but I could think of the volume number, but not the title. But in there, he makes the point that people that adhere to materialistic forms of thought, they develop this craving for violent resolution of issues, that it ends in violence. And these were lectures that he was giving in what I believe was 1916. So that you're talking about a world in crisis at that time, and consequently, here he is in Switzerland, and he has people from all over Europe, from all the various warring nations of Europe. And he told all of them, if you feel a personal calling to represent your nation, by all means, go, And so many people did go to all over Europe and to America. And it's very troubling that the issues that we couldn't work out in World War I were continued in World War II, and now they're trying to stir it up today. The difference today, though, is that we see their game. Okay? And he was very clear, although he was very cautious in the way he did represent it in the lectures that he did during World War I, where he was describing the machinations of secret society. And consequently, anytime you go through a transition from one cycle to another, there can be, upheavals. There's no question about it. And so consequently, when you talk about the cycle we're in, and then you bring in the issue of your secret societies and fraternal orders, of which there's literally thousands in Britain. I mean, that's their thing. In fact, Rudolf Steiner referred to the British as peoples of the lodge, that everybody belongs to all these private clubs. And it's kind of like your parish that you represent, that's like a club. Yeah, I mean, really, it's a congregation of people that come together that have shared ideas or wish to have shared ideas and all that. And then there's all these Freemasonic lodges and various gentlemen's clubs on St. James and all that. And that's really where most of the business actually gets done. And one of the reasons why it's so difficult to follow is that these are conversations that are held sub rosa, or basically privately, over tea or what have you. And many of these associate, like the Pilgrim Society, of which we've done so much research as of late, the Pilgrim Society of Great Britain. And there they are. And the Pilgrims of the United States, and by Anne Pimlott Baker. And we've realized that they're essentially kind of a steering committee for this whole globalist program. Of course, there's various other organizations that are involved. They're just, but if you look at the roster of the organizations, then you see that, oh my, it's the same people. So that people belong to more than one club. And there's various benefits that result from membership in these clubs. One of the main things that you want to keep in mind, like, for example, some of the research that's been done at Americans for Innovation and American Intelligence Media regarding the British Knights of Malta. And of course, there's the Knights of Malta that is located right next to the Vatican, which is, they have their own diplomatic passports, so that's a nice benefit. These societies are basically insider trading venues, and you can't, they ask you to be a member. You don't ask them, can I join? I mean, maybe you could ask one of the members, hey, put in a good word for me or something like that. But these associations are of the ilk. And in fact, I could tell a story that happened years ago. A very dear friend of mine, Marjorie Fisher, who was the wife of Max Fisher, the great real estate magnate from Michigan, who I knew quite well because I worked at their house on their library for many years. But she was sent a letter from the Knights of Malta, the Vatican one, and with this full glossy picture of this guy with a monocle, you know. It freaked her out because, you know, she's Jewish. What is this Catholic order of chivalry want with me being a member? You know, I was like, freaked her out. So we took it and we did a little, you know, consecration over it and burned it to kind of free her from the egregore. But these things can get pretty bizarre, to say the truth, and they're all over the place, and you're swearing fealty to the leader of the group. In the case of the Knights of Malta, now it's the Pope, and in the British Knights of Malta, it happens to be the Queen, who's also the head of the Anglican Church. And so while people keep saying, why do you keep picking on the Queen? She's such a nice lady. Well, based on the things that she says to you, it'd be easy to have that perception, you know. And but yet again, she has those little red boxes that show up at her residence in the middle of the night that have all the notifications from the secret committees, of which she's the only one who knows the members in the committee, members of parliament. And so she basically runs all of the secret committees in parliament. So the whole idea that she's like titulary, just, you know, it's just a title, that she doesn't really run anything, that's laughable. So I guess I over answered your question once again.
I love you over answering my questions. That's what makes this show unique. That's what makes the show unique. Oh, the Queen. Yeah, I think I hate words like foreigners, but if we use it as shorthand, it's only a shorthand word. I think people from outside Britain do have the impression that she's some sort of figurehead. No, she's the sovereign. She is the head of state. The Prime Minister serves the head of state. It's very clear. And she's also very proactive. I mean, I can think of previous monarchs, whether the Windsors like it or not, then they're not the only British royal family, and I doubt if they'll be the last, unfortunately. But, they're not here forever. No, she's a powerful, rich lady, and she knows what to do with those things. She's influential, and she's a businesswoman. But, if us evil libertarians get our way, then it has to become much more of a constitutional monarchy, because I don't think we'll get rid of the whole institution in one go, unfortunately. But, it has to become even more accountable. It has to be even more disempowered, and I do mean that word. And the authority that's taken from her titles must start going to Parliament. Parliament is not just a group of Eton boys doing what she wants, or at least it shouldn't be. I mean, I remember walking around Parliament years back. He's passed on, so I don't think Lord Laird, who was a good friend of mine, will mind me saying this. I was walking around. I used to do a lot of work in the House of Lords. Lord Laird was not only an Irish guy, Scots-Irish, so he took no prisoners. He was a rebel through and through, whether people liked it or not. And, he stood out. He was innovative. He was lots of fun. And he took me on a tour of Westminster Palace, Parliament, as a mate's thing on one visit. And we stood in front of the Queen's Chamber. Nobody ever gets to see the Queen's Chamber. It's completely off limits to any of the visitors. And I was only there because, of course, he was a member of the Lords. And he turned round to me and said, "Look, there's no real democracy here, don't you?" And I went completely quiet and pale and said, "Oh, John, I just wish you hadn't said that here of all places." Did it come as a shock? No, it didn't. But I didn't want a member of Parliament. I didn't want a member of the upper chamber telling me that as we were walking around the upper chamber. So I felt depressed for the rest of the day. So we went and had a glass of sherry. It was really, really pleasant. Because that's life. That's just life. Jimmy Savile, I'm still hoping our wonderful Earth Angel, as she spreads her wings a little more and starts shaking away some of the fetters that have held her down for too long, as she starts making a new prayerful pose to the Almighty, I'm still hoping she can shake away enough of the elites that are plaguing us at the moment. There's a new American hero of mine. You're an American hero of mine, John, but there's another. You have a rival in my affection called What's Her Face, a young girl she's incredibly funny on YouTube. And I was skeptical, I confess, of the paedophile elites. A Jesuit friend of mine said to me a couple of years ago, "You can be so naive, Reverend." But I must be. I'm sorry. I mean, how can people get any pleasure in things like that? Anyway, I'm incredibly skeptical over those sorts of reports and those sorts of investigations. And I was until I saw this young woman's, oh God, I can't remember who she was exposing. And it was that apparently there was a website called something like Toddlers and Tiaras. I mean, what is wrong with these people? Chrissy something, was it Chrissy something? I can't remember offhand. She said she was being used as a scapegoat for the elite, and she was messaging. So people have been taking screenshots of these appalling messages, on Twitter, and for me, it just makes, I don't know, I can't even imagine why people would pursue things like that. But anyway, so I now concede the point something's going on, which leads me back to Jimmy Savile. I mean, a dear friend of mine, the quite radical British journalist Alexander Barron, I mean, he did some work in that. I don't know if he published his results. He's quite an extraordinary guy in all sorts of ways. I said to him when the whole Jimmy Savile thing was dying down, because of course nowadays you can never quite work out what's muck throwing, what's mud throwing and what's not. And even he, I mean, he's quite a skeptic, said, "Well, no, some of it's true." And you think, my God, what is up with these people if they allow these things to happen and nobody ever says a word? So I'm getting a lot more oh, is that the word I'm looking for? Open to the fact the Earth Angel is shaking away these terrible shackles that have been holding her down, and aiming much more towards the good as we take an evolutionary step forward. Yeah, I did hear the stories at the time about him donating huge sums of money to various institutions. It has to be balanced against the fact there was a time when I was a director and a bit of a producer for Art at the People's Voice. I mean, that was David Icke's. I mean, it wasn't just his project, but David Icke's first global TV channel. It was actually going to succeed, which it's a great shame it collapsed. Where people were talking about these things. The one story I remember of his, I think it's in one of his books as well, which I didn't really go for, was when he confronted the British Prime Minister Edward Heath, and apparently he was some sort of dark high wizard, casting evil incantations everywhere and doing all sorts of unspeakable things. And I remember I was a kid growing up when he was a prime minister, thinking all he manages to do is completely slaughter Christmas carols every single year because he thought he was some type of musician. And you'd have these terrible, terrible renditions where he'd have to do something spectacular with Christmas carols each year. And you think, oh God, stop it, please. But so I find certain parts of those stories very difficult to believe. But if this young girl investigative reporter is coming up with such genuine nastiness, and there are screenshots, and Twitter itself is behaving in such a bizarre fashion, like they're punishing the people that don't like, what was it called again? Toddlers and tiaras, and they don't like the sort of open, immoral smut that's being shared. I mean, I don't know what you think, John. I hope you don't think I'm incredibly naive too, because that will be across the board if that's true. But I confess I do feel rather naive and out of my depth when it comes to these things, because I can't see what people are getting apart from the merest and most superficial form of gratification imaginable. I'll hand over to you after I just say this. I don't think Britain is particularly religious. I'm not sure it ever was. I do think it's very spiritual. I think it's essential we remember those differences. On the surface, certainly the big cities here are moving much more towards a sort of reductive materialist atheism, which is a great shame. It's a shame for them, it's having whole dimensions of their life. But I do think Britain's a very spiritual country. Hello?
I don't know what happened.
Did you hear any of that?
Yeah, no. You just cut out for a minute. I don't know. Oh. It's a result of them routing our signal through the Ukraine. Or should I say Ukraine? Leave out the. In any event, I don't know what happened to our. I disappeared for a while. I don't know if you noticed or not. It crashed. So maybe they're screwing with us. I don't know. Or maybe it's just a terrible signal. But we're still here. And I checked, and it's still working on YouTube. I don't know if I start checking it everywhere else, I'll start getting all kinds of interference. Anyways, where were we? Okay, so yeah, again, people shouldn't make the mistake of thinking that I like looking into these things. It's just that I see where we are as we turn a page of history, and I find that there's these really dark forces that are in play, and I'm always reminded of what J.R.R. Tolkien said about Lord of the Rings, that it was really meant to be prophetic. It's that he saw that was what was coming, this whole idea of one ring to rule them all, kind of concept, this whole neo-imperialism, as I've described it elsewhere in conversations with Douglas Gabriel from American Intelligence Media. And you can look up our video, What is Neo-Imperialism, and see my thoughts on that. But I think that we're in a difficult era, and Rudolf Steiner makes the point. He goes through a reassessment of history, and we have to re-envision the world, really, because it's due to the lack of allowing for spiritual influences that we get into the problems that we're having. And these various factions that call themselves liberal, that are very, very non-liberal, the eternal window is gone. That the, I don't know what that means, but the coming up with some kind of better mousetrap is going to fix the dilemma we're in. And Rudolf Steiner is very adamant about the point of that we're in the dilemma we're in. It's due to the materialism that we're in this dilemma. And that's why I labeled our conversations, What is Truth? Because if your model of consciousness and of what a human being is not including a wide enough perspective on what that means, then you're only going to come to an end. And the less it accommodates the reality, the phenomenology, or really we could call it the noumenology, because it has to do with what's actual, that it will grind to a nub. And that's why I say materialism as a model of consciousness leads to entropy. And that's their concept, by the way. They're the ones that came up with this whole idea that the universe is going to wind down like some great clock and finally just collapse in on itself. They can't help but come up with that because all of their ideas are based upon the mechanical realm. And it's actually disturbing beyond that, because ultimately, and I say ultimately frequently, just as I say consequently frequently, because these are the ultimate consequences of that type of mindset. And so you have this, the AI destiny, the singularity of Ray Kurzweil, and all this kind of weird gamesmanship of these people. And you look at who is it? It's like Bill Gates, Hillary Clinton, some of the most on a soul level unhealthiest people that I can think of. You know, it's like, why would I want to adhere to something that came out of their mouths? It's like, no way. They don't hold a place in my universe that makes decisions, as far as I'm concerned. Or Kamala Harris, who's, you know, she's, now I get in trouble because I point out the reality that her father, who, by the way, is a protege of the Pilgrim Society anyways, but her father was the one to point out that when she was talking about reparations, he's like saying, hey, wait a minute, you know, you're descended from one of the top slaveholders and a lawyer down in the Caribbean, you know, and she doesn't admit that. She doesn't admit a lot of things. So they depend on falsehoods to prop up their path, and so it can only fail. But it's just a question of how long it takes to fail. Stalin's vision of the world lasted about the length of one human life, you know. So, you know, it's roughly 70 years or so, and that's the way these things work. And I've made the case before, the reason the Catholic Church is still around is because its hierarchy is based upon the ninefold system of Dionysius the Areopagite. That's the most quoted reference in the writings of St. Thomas Aquinas, so that you have the ninefold hierarchies of angels, archangels, archives, Zeusii, dunamis, kuriotetes, thrones, cherubim, seraphim, that whole sequence of spiritual beings. And if you wish to enter into the works of Rudolf Steiner, or even my two books specifically, that's what it's about. You have to be able to begin to incorporate into your vocabulary concepts that include the spiritual world. And materialism is insufficient to solve any of the challenges that we're going through. And so consequently, Rudolf Steiner made the point in his outline of esoteric science. He said that were he to give the work another name, he would call it the Grail, right? And he also said that people get confused when he uses the terms of like old moon, old sun, old Saturn, the pre-earthly realms. And then there's also post-earthly realms where, like future Jupiter evolution, where, as St. Paul said, ye shall be as the angels. That when we get done with human evolution, we will, those of us who graduate, by the way, there's a big caveat because not everybody graduates, and that's your opposition, that you will evolve into the angelic realm, and from then to the archangelic, and from there to archi, and so forth. So the whole basis of esoteric Christianity is an understanding that was developed. It comes from the school of Athens of Dionysius the Areopagite, the first bishop of Athens, who was taught by St. Paul. And then as far as the Freemasonic aspect of it, which is another branch of it, it was the disciple of St. Paul, which is St. Mark, the writer of the gospel, and they were the ones that trained, he's called Ormus. He was a Serapian church, a priest at the Serapeum in Egypt. And so that the whole lodge concept has developed out of this Ormus. And so just some seeds I'm planting there. I'm not sure that everybody's going to know what to do with them, but they could refer to my first book to find out, the Arcana of the Grail Angel. But in any event, Rudolf Steiner makes the point that when he uses these words, old sun, old Saturn, old moon, and all of this, he said that that's the Christ language. That if you wish to enter into a deeper relationship to Christ, you have to develop your vocabulary so that you have a means of comprehending things that are beyond just material existence. And so when you start coming into understanding the physical body, etheric body, astral body, and then the ego, which is the I am of that's described, Moses sees it in a burning bush, but yet it's incorporated into Jesus at the baptism. That is the crux of the matter, is that's our humanity. That is what we're working on. We're in the fourth world, Saturn, Sun, Moon, Earth. And I had a long conversation about this when Thomas Benyakia, the spokesman of the Hopi Elders, and he agreed with me. He says, yes, we say this is the fourth world. So this is not something that Rudolf Steiner confabulated. This is something that's part and parcel of the esoteric traditions, that if you search and you understand how to interpret these things, you'll see that that's the teachings of the initiates. And so consequently, when you get into my frame of reference, where I attempt to show the interlocking principles of the various streams, although my particular school is the Western Rosicrucian Grail stream, as represented by Rudolf Steiner, nonetheless, I'm also conversant with many other different mystery schools. But they just don't come up in the conversation because I don't run into a lot of people that are conversant with, the writings of Gaudapada or would know what Anupapadaka is. So I'm confounding people with all kinds of foreign things, and I want to bring it back to earth a little bit. So I think that you're good at that, so I'll let you do it.
Oh, oh gosh, no, the temptation of comparative religion. Do I go there or not? Right, I remembered I asked my young companion while you were speaking. Chrissy Teigen apparently is the fall guy and perpetrator of this recent expose. What a very unpleasant woman, but the sound of it. London clubs. I remember being taken to the Athenaeum a couple of years back by Professor Raymond Tallis, who of course is an international savant. He says he's an unbeliever. I mean, if he is, he's a bit like Rudolf Steiner, one of the most religious unbelievers I can think of. You know, I mean, so it was a chance to see how the other business class actually lives. Well, of course, he's a scholar. I think you're absolutely right. Most of the big deals are done there. Although I noticed we had a glass of champagne with our tea, which apparently is part of the course in these places. If ever you come to London, John, we are going in there. We're going to take the gates of heaven by storm, and we will rush in there, whether they like it or not. There we are. Where do I go? For me, there's only one. I've got a weird view. I've got a weird personal view, I suppose, of religious mysteries, and it seems to be, I don't know, crystallizing more. I don't know why recently. I mean, I'm a devout Abrahamist, I suppose. For me, there's only one revealed religion, which started as Judaism, became Christianity, and has splintered into Islam. I know there are severe doctrinal problems with that, but hey, maybe the whole problem is, God isn't some sort of examiner waiting for us to come up with the right doctrine. Maybe as wonderful as doctrines are within different religions, that's not the be all and end all. And it strikes me that religious stream is claiming something unique. It's claiming to be revealed, which is a far from simplistic term. It's a far from simplistic claim. Knowledge dropping down from above. That's not what it means. It's something much more profound, something much more complex than that. We're all talking about the same prophets. Yes, we've got divergent views about certain things that happened to the prophets. But since the original documents of all of our religions, of all of the fragments, of all of the streams of that religion have gone missing, I suspect what we're meant to do is follow the idea, the impulse more than doctrines, and do something radical like loving each other and looking for wisdom, because that seems to run through the entire stream I'm talking about. Therefore, it's getting me into lots of trouble locally. Next week, you might just have a decapitated head on a pole where they finally caught up with me for saying these terrible things locally. There we are. But I'm sorry, that's what I'm thinking at the minute. I'm sorry, guys, it's what I'm thinking at the minute. What can I say? Because I can't really think of anywhere else. Because if I, as you know, I've done a lot of work in Central Asia. I've been to Central Asia a lot. If I go to Central Asia and I'm asked by normally the older patrons of the family to say Bismillah with them, it is beautiful. It is beautiful. And I can't escape because I'm a pastor. The minute they know I'm a pastor, they get bloody insistent that I join them in Bismillah. So, there's no escape. I remember when I was in Azerbaijan, they're Shia, of course. We went to meet the cousin of the stone who's in the Kaaba. And I think we got on quite well, actually. I mean, there weren't too many heated words. So I said hello to the cousin of the stone who was in the Kaaba. He's about that big. He's about that big. And the old ladies who were lighting candles, it was just like a Catholic church. They were running around just making sure we'd got tea and begging us to go and light candles with them. So it was delightful. So if we start looking at the human side of this religious stream, because I think it's a single stream, if we start looking at it from that angle, as opposed to what contentious, groups of scholars have said, then maybe we might start getting somewhere. I mean, for me, increasingly, what is Buddhism? I mean, Buddhism for me would be some sort of philosophy, and that's not to denigrate it in any way, shape, or form. I mean, look how high the human heart, mind, and soul can fly if it's simply a philosophy. That is absolutely extraordinary. I mean, that a human being can do those things. That's extraordinary. Whereas things like Zen, Shinto, Taoism, even dare I say, most of the schools of Hinduism, for me, increasingly are tending to be, I'm tending to see them more as human cultural spirituality aiming at the absolute instead of the absolute reaching down to us. And that for me would be that's the difference. I'm aware there are flaws in that argument because I suppose the word Abrahamic itself has too many limitations. I mean, there's a school in India based around the Bhagavan, I think. I can't remember, it was so long ago. And that concept is directly comparable to Western notions of what we think God is in the Christian tradition. So I'm aware there are loopholes, but surely the point stands. There's a stream, a cultural stream, a religious impulse in our affairs, in human affairs, that has becomes, that's from a revealed source and is trying to lift everybody upwards by reaching down to us, a direct reaching down of something knowledgeable, of something loving, of something wise, whereas everything else is an attempt to lift ourselves up. Therefore, I'm a complete nut about comparative religion. I think it's absolutely wonderful that what we can see in each other's countries and each other's cultures, it's like clues in a jigsaw puzzle. And sometimes you think, oh gosh, I really know what sort of picture that's forming. And then, then you don't, because the picture's even bigger than you thought it was. What am I saying to justify that position? The prophets of the Old Testament are always, of course, didn't see sin as an individual thing. That comes later with Christianity. Not saying that's wrong. I think that's a development. But the prophets of the Old Testament really would have had great trouble thinking of an individual as sinful. A society was sinful, a culture was sinful, an ethnic group was sinful, a nation was sinful, not an individual. And they're constantly moaning about the fact that everybody's view of God is too small. And then, of course, they're stoned, and then everybody realizes they were right afterwards. That may have sounded a little flippant. It's not, because that is basically what happened. They're constantly shouting at all of us, your view of the absolute is too narrow, it's too small, it's too limited. And what we've been doing until recently is defending that instead of listening to them. So I personally love you speaking about comparative religion. As I say, even though I've got these sort of weird, quirky views on it all, and I think maybe we need to explore that in as a set theme in the weeks ahead, because that is leading to a very great, instinctive, powerful. I'm trying to avoid the word academic and rational knowledge, because it's not simply knowledgeable. Let's stick with intuitive. It's leading to some sort of wonderful, intuitive, imaginative understanding of who we are and where we are in the world. Yeah, I mean, if I do resonate with a mystery school, obviously it's the Western one, and but I think you're the expert on that. What do you think of what I've been saying, John?
Well, I think that it's something that many people have struggled with, and if you look for kind of a commonality amongst the scholarly community over the last couple of hundred years or so, it's tended to be the Hermetic writings that have seemed to have had the most universal appeal in that regard, as in building a bridge, is that you're going to find Vedic scholars that are very comfortable with the Hermetic writings, just as you find Christian, Jewish, and Muslim scholars that are comfortable conversing in that idiom. So you have the Hermetic writings that came out of Egypt, but it's a Greco-Egyptian impulse, really. Essentially, it has to do with the Greek transmission of certain concepts that arose out of Alexandria in Egypt. And so that's a good place to look. In fact, the bookstore that I managed for all those years, the Mayflower Bookshop, published Thrice Greatest Hermes, which was G.R.S. Mead's translation of the Hermetic writings. It's still one of the standard texts for that area of research. But you find it's interesting, you bring up peoples of the book is the way they're described in Islam. And it's very few people realize, though, but included amongst the peoples of the book within Islam is the Zoroastrian religion, which is, the religion that came out of Zarathustra, but also the Sabadian, or the Sabians, okay, which is, they were the Hermetics. And there's only one passage in the Quran that points that out, but it's there nonetheless. So they're accepted as peoples of the book, their Hermetic writings being their central text. So that you have the Sabians of the city of Haran, which is up in the northern Levant region, up in near the border of Syria and Turkey, and in whatchamacallit, Iraq. So consequently, and I didn't know we were going to go there, or I would have that book sitting next to me, but I don't. But that's okay, because we're getting a little obscure here. But when you start getting into the whole idea of a religion, that's really a Abrahamic concept, because these other faiths, world faiths, shall we call them, Shintoism and Hinduism and Taoism and all that, they point towards the destiny of particular individuals. Confucianism, like Chinese, they don't look at these as like religion. It's like Confucius is this guy, and he said this stuff. It's not a religion, It's like it's a guy and the body of his work. Same with Lao Tzu in Taoism, of which it was said that there were literally hundreds of volumes of Lao Tzu's writings that have since been lost, although I'm quite confident that they're lodged away somewhere in some cave or some private library, that they haven't really been lost, that they weren't actually destroyed by the Cultural Revolution during Mao or even before that. Consequently, this is what we're up against. This whole concept of cultural revolution, that people think that there's going to be some kind of progressive result that happens when you destroy things. The ultimate destruction of culture is a step forward. And Rudolf Steiner does make the point, though, that for people that are pursuing materialism as their central mindset, the end game in that mindset is destructive. Ultimately, it's inescapable, because it does not have a life principle to animate it. It's a dead concept, and so consequently, it will lead to death. And so consequently, that's why it's so tied into the mystery of birth and death is the fourth mystery. We're in the fourth world. The fifth mystery is the mystery of evil. We're in the fifth post-Atlantean period. So we're going through all this stuff. And you look at like the evils that have been unleashed on the world, when you look at the world wars and all that of the 20th century, and all the different issues, just the machinations, endless machinations, and it's still continuing. So we're struggling with the mystery of evil. But the challenge for those that are people that believe that God is love, that would be the Christian dispensation, then you'd see that this is the opportunity, that on the back of this potential for evil arises the phoenix of freedom. Without that, that capacity to do the wrong thing, to sin, which to sin means to miss the target, right? That's the literal translation of the Greek word that I don't remember at the moment, but I can look it up. But in any event, to sin is to miss the target. So if we have the opportunity to make mistakes and we do the right thing, see, that's how you graduate. And if you want to graduate from the fourth world, that like what the Hopi talk about, the fourth world, Earth, and venture forward and become an angel, then that's a good thing. Or you end up like what are known as the Luciferic beings, and they're the beings that went through the evolution previous to the Earth, the third stage in the series, which is called in esoteric science Old Moon. The beings that didn't complete their evolution in the previous world are called retarded angels. And so they have the task of intervening in human evolution. But people tend to oversimplify all this stuff. And it's as complicated as the population in New York City. You just walk through Times Square and you'll see any type of person you can possibly imagine. It's the same way with spiritual beings, especially with the retarded ones. And they may even be well-intentioned, and there's ones that have even aligned themselves with the God of love that have had their come to Jesus moment, so to speak. And then there are those that vehemently reject it and are incurring this rebellion that is going on and have created an unholy alliance with Satan and wish to destroy the world in which we live. And then we can all just become a bunch of ghosts, whereas the satanic forces want us just to integrate into the singularity and just, become human robots. It's like equally creepy. And so consequently, now it's come out more, it's starting to become common knowledge that that's what these people are up to. I mean, before when I talk about this stuff, I stopped talking about it because people told me I was nuts. You're crazy. You conspiracy people are crazy. You know that? And, well, okay. Conspiracy means to breathe together, and I guess robots don't breathe, so they can't conspire. They don't have to breathe together because they have an integrated circuit. But this whole issue that has been coming up regarding the Shadowgate, it just shows you that the level of development. It's very much like the series on. I watched all I think it's 5 seasons of it. Person of Interest. It's about competing AI systems and with the good AI system, if there is such a thing, competing against the evil, authoritarian AI system. And it's really something to think about, especially when you consider that what they were capable of finding out is that this is much closer to the truth than most people thought. And so consequently, we're in the thick of this, and this gives us the opportunity to pursue the path of the God of love. The greater the temptation, the greater the value of the lesson. And so I hope that people find their moments of contemplation. I think that we try to always remember to consecrate our meal with a prayer before we eat, because Jesus did say, do this in memory of me, didn't he? It's one of the few instructions he gave. It's consecrating your meal. It's like, I don't know, I'm here in the US and I'm not sure it conforms to the American idea. I mean, even if I get back to what I was pointing to earlier with our friend de Tocqueville, he calls it democracy in America. Well, first of all, we're not a democracy. We're a constitutional republic that uses democratic principles of electing our representatives. And so that's something that always gets kind of confused. Not always, but almost always gets confused, especially by the Democrats. You know, they always talk about, well, we want to protect the spread of democracy. Well, this is not a democracy, so quit trying to spread it, because this is a constitutional republic, and you're confusing all the people overseas, because they'd love to emulate what America is doing. Why do you think so many people want to come here? Have you figured it out yet? It's because we got a lot of things right. Yeah, we got a lot of things wrong, you know, but consequently, it's up to us to fix them. If we have a stupid government with stupid people representing us, that's because we've been acting stupid, right? So I feel a sense of responsibility for how stupid the government is regarding all the issues that they're going through. But so I just feel I have a responsibility to try and find out what is truth. And one of the biggest truths that we've been able to uncover is election corruption through voting machines, that there's no way that you can secure digital information. So you have to throw the digital voting system out the window, the one that was financed by George Soros and Baron Mark Malloch Brown and was put into place in Venezuela and put in Chavez in Venezuela and turn them down the road to communism. So we have to make sure that we have verifiable voting. And you have the same issue in the UK. I'm just curious to what extent you're working on it, even though you're all under the Queen, but you know, I'm not sure what that means. I mean, it's like she doesn't really get too involved in day-to-day affairs in any direct sense. She just sends messages to people in her secret committees. So here I am. I'm just rambling on, and I don't want to use up all our time with my rambling. But consequently, there's so many levels to this, and I would just like to try and as we get towards the last 15 minutes or so, to try and see if we can come up with something, some kind of alchemy to help transmute this whole dilemma. And I think that it's seeing the value in it is a big part of it, that you're be given an opportunity. What are you going to do? You going to do something? I mean, I'm doing this. You know, somebody complains at me about environmental issue. I say, I planted 10, 12,000 trees that are 90 feet tall. What have you done? You know, it's like, come on. You know, it's like everybody's got, you know, they're just word salad. They're all chatting. Get involved. You know, like recently there was a meeting of people locally from the Republican Party that met with President Trump for 4 hours. And it was really interesting what they were able to report to the Republican group here. He'd said that he'd had, you know, in consequence of the prayer meetings that he'd involved himself in, that he felt a sense of grace overlighting him. And he said he felt a sense of guidance coming from that, and that he is striving to stick with that as his kind of compass regarding his path. And so I think we all have to pray for him, because with all of his flaws, I think he really is a human being, and I think he really is somebody who's trying to do the right thing. I don't think he gets it right all the time, because he's still championing 5G, which I think is a real biological problem in my mind, and he still is sucked into this whole dilemma of vaccine. But Moses said, life of man is in the blood, you know, and so my blood is sacred. I'm not letting any doctor that's working for Fauci or Bill Gates, that's my sacred domain. You stay out.
Gosh, we're covering huge swathes of ground today. First of all, renewal. Every time the present troubles come up, I keep thinking of a song that Shirley Bassey did. I think it was with the group Propeller Heads. You know, that everything seems clear and the revolution's near, but hey, it's just a little bit of history repeating itself, which is some of the best lyrics I've ever heard and needed to be delivered by the incredible Shirley Bassey. Oh no, Britain's becoming America without the advantages. That's my trouble. Like a constitution, never throw away the glory and importance of a written constitution. I don't. Therefore, we lurch from one problem to another without, guided by previous precedents, not all of which are that laudable, to be honest. So we've got to be a bit careful of becoming America without any of the advantages that Americans have, and I think that's certainly happening. You reminded me that a year or so ago, I went with my young companion to a sort of intelligence day of all things held in Whitehall. The RUSI group, RUSI, I can't quite remember what it stands for. It was very, very interesting because there were quite some high-powered spies. I mean, that's the actual word, intelligence gatherers. And what struck me was the old school was actually very, very British in that wonderful David Niven sense. Yes, I quite like David Niven too, even though I didn't know he was meant to be a member of MI5. But that's scary, isn't it? But they were worried about ethics, and they were worried about intelligence gathering. I was wearing my collar that day, I think, and so they were aware of the obvious ethical pain in the arse in the room, I think. But I couldn't floor them. It was exemplary. It was the younger people, and oh God, do I sound like some clawing old great grandfather moaning about the young generation? I'm sorry, young people, I don't mean to do that. But there was a difference. The old guard, for want of a much better phrase, really did seem concerned, and they talked about the morality of ethics gathering, of intelligence gathering, and why it was important to keep an ethical and moral stance for two simple reasons. Number one, we were all human, and number two, that you couldn't really rely on the information that was gathered if you weren't doing that. It became less and less credible along the line. And it was the young whippersnappers of the day, not all of them, but some of them, that seemed to think this was an irrelevancy. And I thought, my heavens, have things really come to that sort of cultural divide? I mean, it's reflected for me in this whole cancel culture movement. I mean, is it a movement? Isn't it a movement? I don't know. There are lots of people talking about it, nevertheless. That seems to be in Britain. I don't know how it manifests in America, if it is manifesting in America. In Britain, it seems to be a misunderstanding of the socialist ideal, which is even more intriguing, which has now set itself up as something increasingly authoritarian and increasingly against the will of the populace. We know better than you what you should do with your lives. That's not British socialism as it manifested in the last century or so. That's completely alien to that way of thinking. And I mean, he's got to the extent now, even Ricky Gervais, I don't know if you've heard of him, John, British comedian, actor, a very talented man in all sorts of ways. It's got to the stage now where he made a public statement recently about someone who'd gone to jail for telling a joke. This is ridiculous. It's literally no joke. Is this what we're all sinking into? And people tend to forget. Yeah, exactly. People tend to forget culture is a safety net as well as a mechanism for creativity. It's a mesh of mores and ethics which we abandon at our peril. And the fact, there's an irony in this country. I mean, the Lib Dems stopped being liberal in any real sense years ago and seem to be far too interested in slaughtering each other in party conferences than they do in winning an election. I can't even remember who the present leader of the Lib Dem party is. That's how memorable they are. The old liberals, I mean, they're all so posh. Have they ever actually left Oxford or Cambridge, and gone to see what the real world is like? So they can't be trusted. And it's only weirdo libertarians like me that end up worrying about it all. But there's a seismic shift trying to take place in Britain, whereby authoritarianism is seen as the norm, and the old, dare I say, tradition, that terrible T word, which of course ultimately in this country evolved from the Danegeld. It didn't evolve from Roman law, because we gave the Romans a bloody nose and told them to sod off. So the Danegeld, where every warrior was equal, every warrior was free. I mean, all the Vikings brought it with them. They weren't just marauding monsters. You are free. You are free until the law shows you should be incarcerated. I can't remember a time before previously those basic cultural assumptions in Britain were even being debated, let alone under threat. And the debate never took place, and very clearly they seem to be under threat now, which is why I can't believe someone like Ricky Gervais is practically having his arm twisted, although I don't believe he's a coward in any sense of the word. And I know he believes in freedoms, cultural responsibility, freedom, etc., where he feels he has to come out and say what we should all know on a gut level. No one should go to jail for telling a joke. So that's what's happening here. I mean, I hope and pray that that's not happening in America, but certainly the notion, the very assumption, I mean, you're big on tolerance, I know that. The assumption of tolerance is under question itself now, along with free speech.
Yeah, that's the thing, and it's like they've made, and this used to come up on the pew with Roseanne Barr, and I used to tease her, I said, because they basically have a bounty on comedians now. I mean, they don't have comedians anymore, not really, because when you look at the basis of humor, most of the comedians that we used to laugh about, it's too politically incorrect to say the things that they said. So there's no cultural norm, allegedly, that these conformists can find where that's possible. So you're people like Eddie Murphy or Robin Williams or, Don Rickles, they would line him up and shoot him, the things he said, because he actually insulted people, But the basis of humor is that there has to be the brunt of the humor, right? You're making a joke about somebody, and nobody made better fun of the Irish jokes that I know of than Irish priest I knew, So it's like, and nobody told better Italian jokes than my Italian buddies, and it's everybody had a sense of humor at one time. That's been lost. And regarding our Constitution, I think that one of the best things available at this time is Richard Proctor. He's got a PhD, and he wrote a book called Saving the Constitution, and you can get it through bathroomeconomics.com, but he's a frequent guest on InfoWars. That's an excellent book. And might as well get around to, what did I do with the rest of, I got everything stashed all over the place. Excuse the side of my head for a second. I have your books here. Here they are. Here's to all three of David's books. So you have his major work, Mount Athos Inside Me, Essays on Religion, Swedenborg and the Arts, David William Parry, the award-winning author, and his book, Caliban's Redemption. That's also available on Amazon. And then you have The Grammar of Witchcraft. And those of you that are Christians out there, don't freak out. It's about Shakespeare. It's still okay to talk about Shakespeare, isn't it? Or has Shakespeare become politically incorrect? That's a real question in my mind. But nonetheless, David's books are available on Amazon, and my books, The Arcana of the Grail Angel, which would help you sort out some of the pretty abstruse concepts I've been sharing today. But the Spiritual Science of the Holy Blood, the Holy Grail, it's a study developed out of the work of Rudolf Steiner of the underground streams of esoteric Christianity, which flowed from the Brotherhood of the Holy Grail to the Order of the Knights Templar and the True Rosicrucian Order. And then the book that follows that, which is more of a meditative guide, that one is 640 pages. This is much thinner volume, but it's heavier in many regards, the Arcana of Light on the Path. But in both of them, I have put together oodles and oodles of cosmological diagrams that will help you understand what all this might mean. And David has copies on the way. They should arrive in the next few days, and then that'll be fun. And it's always such a pleasure to be able to talk to you. I'm not sure we've resolved anything, but then again, that's the nature of the quest. It's not a question of resolving things so much as extending the denouement. And but consequently, as I want to say very frequently, I hear consequently. You keep saying consequently. Well, that's really, isn't that what karma's all about? Consequently. But if I can't find humor in all this, if they're going to have a bounty on comedians, then we're all doomed. And so I think that could be our mission this week: is save the comedians. And so we just have a few minutes. And
have we got one last statement, John? One last statement. I'll tell you how bad it has got. A friend of mine, Eleanor Bennett, is an actress and a comedian, and she is working into the London comedy circuit at the minute. She's a very talented person. And apparently, sometimes the young comedians are just coming on and shouting slogans. There was one young girl recently who walked onto the stage and said, "I'm against racism," and raised a fist. And she got a round of applause and walked off the stage again. And I said to her, "But that's not an act. That's not a performance. That's sloganizing." So that's how bad it's getting here at the minute.
And if anybody is moved to buy David and I a cup of coffee or support our research for donations, it's www.paypal.me/John Barnwell 888 or www.paypal.me/DParry 777. That's D Parry 777. And so you can buy us a cup of coffee. And I want to acknowledge the people that have done that, and also people that have purchased my books, although it's getting to the point to where I really don't know what moved them to purchase them, but I'm glad that they're out there, and I'm getting nice feedback from people. So it's good that they seem to be understanding what I'm trying to get at. And so if you could maybe let's consecrate this moment with a prayer from Reverend David. That'd be really nice.
Oh, Holy God of light, great Christ Jesus, in this increasingly darkened time, may we find your love and wisdom in our hearts and our minds, in our families, in our friends, and in our communities ever more clearly. Let's break down unnecessary boundaries and understand the common core of human decency that binds us all to a happier life in this world and an extension of that life in the beyond. Amen.
Amen. Well, David, thank you so much, my friend. I'll see you next week.
See you next week, John.